I felt it in the silence on the phone, that peculiar absence of sound where words should have been. The pause stretched between us like a vast ocean neither of us knew how to cross. "I'm heading out of town for the weekend," Emily finally said, her voice deliberately casual. "I need to clear my head." My fingers tightened around the phone. "Where are you going?" "Somewhere quiet. I just need space, trees, air." Her voice floated through the speaker, detached and distant, as if she was already gone. I stood in our apartment hallway, staring at her overnight bag by the door. The bag she'd packed before telling me she was leaving. "I can drive you to the station," I offered, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. A desperate grab at normalcy. "No need," she replied too quickly. "I already called a ride." The notification ping from her phone cut through our conversation. She glanced down at it, then back at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "That's them now," she said, lifting her bag. No lingering embrace. No kiss goodbye. Just the soft click of our apartment door closing behind her. I stood in the empty hallway, staring at the rectangular patch of floor where her suitcase had been moments before. The space looked wrong somehow, like a painting with a crucial element erased. Max, our golden retriever, sat beside me, his head tilted in that way dogs do when they sense something humans can't quite grasp. "It's fine, buddy," I said, scratching behind his ears. "She'll be back Sunday night." Max's tail thumped against the floor, unconvinced. I attempted to salvage the evening with routine. Ordered takeout from the Thai place down the street. Settled on the couch with my Kung Pao chicken. Started the new episode of that show we'd been watching together, but my attention wandered before the opening credits finished. The food turned cold as I stared at the screen, not really seeing it. Emily and I had been together for 4 years. Lived together for 2. We had matching coffee mugs and a shared calendar on the refrigerator. We had a dog, for God's sake. People with problems don't adopt dogs together. Yet something had shifted between us so gradually I couldn't pinpoint when it started. Conversations that once flowed now stalled. Silences that were once comfortable now felt charged with unspoken words. Her smile seemed practiced rather than genuine. "She's just stressed about work," I told Max, who had hopped onto the couch beside me, his warm body pressing against my leg. "That promotion's been tough on her." Max rested his chin on my knee, eyes following mine to the TV screen where characters laughed about something I'd missed entirely. I made it through half an episode before I reached for my phone. Told myself I wouldn't check where she was. Told myself it was an invasion of privacy. Told myself I trusted her. I opened my brother Ethan's contact first. We had shared our locations permanently after that hiking trip last year where he'd lost cell service for 6 hours and nearly gave our mother a heart attack. My thumb hovered over the screen, hesitating. Just check on Ethan, I thought. Make sure he made it home from his business trip. I opened the Find My app, scanning the map for my brother's location. There he was, safely at home, probably watching the same show but actually paying attention to it. As I was about to close the app, another location caught my eye. Emily's. Still sharing her location since that weekend trip to Denver 2 years ago. We'd never thought to turn it off. I stared at the pulsing blue dot, my throat tightening. She wasn't on a train. She wasn't anywhere near trees or open air. She was still in the city. In a neighborhood I recognized but rarely visited. One of those upscale areas with luxury condominiums and rooftop gardens where people drank complicated cocktails and talked about their investment portfolios. I closed the app, set my phone face down on the coffee table. Picked it back up. Checked again. The blue dot hadn't moved. Max whined softly beside me, sensing the change in my breathing, the tension in my shoulders. "It's probably nothing," I said, but the words rang hollow in our quiet apartment. Maybe she's visiting Melissa first. But Melissa lived on the other side of town. I switched off the TV, the sudden silence suffocating. The digital clock on our media console blinked 9 p.m. Outside, darkness had settled over the city, streetlights casting yellow pools on the pavement below our window. I grabbed my keys. I drove on autopilot, one hand on the wheel, the other clutching my phone like a lifeline. The familiar streets blurred past my window as I navigated toward that blue dot on my screen. Each traffic light seemed to last an eternity, each intersection a decision point where I could still turn back, still preserve whatever remained of my trust in Emily. Yet I kept driving. The night air hung heavy around me, unseasonably warm for early autumn. I rolled down the window, hoping the breeze might clear my head. It didn't. All I could think about was Emily's too casual tone, the overnight bag already packed, the way she'd rushed out without our usual goodbye kiss. The pieces were forming a picture I didn't want to see. I parked 2 blocks away from her location, killing the engine but sitting motionless behind the wheel. What exactly was my plan here? To catch her in whatever lie she was living? To confront her in some dramatic scene like in those TV shows we used to watch together? Outside my car window, the neighborhood exuded wealth and exclusivity. Renovated brownstones with pristine facades. Expensive cars parallel parked with geometric precision. Stylish young professionals walking small, carefully groomed dogs. Emily didn't know anyone who lived here, or at least she'd never mentioned anyone. I checked the app again. Her blue dot hadn't moved, pinpointing a high-rise building at the corner of the next block. Modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a doorman visible through the glass entrance. 10 minutes passed as I sat there, rehearsing confrontations in my head, each scenario worse than the last. Finally, I stepped out of my car, locking it with a beep that sounded too loud in the quiet street. My legs carried me forward while my mind screamed at me to turn back. I circled the block twice, studying the building from every angle. It was 10 stories of luxury with balconies and terraces adorning the upper floors. The kind of place that had a concierge and a rooftop pool, where residents probably knew each other's names but not their stories. On my second pass, I noted which windows were illuminated, trying to match the blue dot's location to an actual physical space. Near the top floor, corner unit, tall windows without curtains. Figures moving inside. I positioned myself across the street, pretending to check my phone while watching the building. That's when I heard it, Emily's laugh. Not her polite social laugh or her amused chuckle, but that full-throated, uninhibited laugh she reserved for people she genuinely liked. The sound carried from an open window above, floating down to the street where it pierced me like a physical blow. I pressed myself against a nearby storefront, hidden in shadow, my heart hammering against my ribs. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe this was work-related. Maybe I was overreacting. But Emily had said she was leaving town. Had said she needed trees and air. Had already been packed when she made that announcement. I returned to my car, sitting in the dark with my hands gripping the steering wheel. The minutes crawled by, 10:20, as I tried to make sense of what was happening. My phone screen kept lighting up with notifications from friends, from apps, from a world that continued spinning while mine seemed to be crumbling. Just as I was considering driving home, convincing myself I'd made a mistake, the building's front door opened. A man stepped out, young, athletic build, confident posture. He wore dark jeans and a button-down shirt rolled up at the sleeves, revealing tattooed forearms. He patted his pockets, pulled out a cigarette and lit it with practiced ease. I slumped lower in my seat, though there was no way he could see me from this distance. He took a long drag, blew the smoke skyward, then pulled out his phone. His face illuminated by the screen's glow as he typed something. A moment later, I heard Emily's voice float down from above. "I'll be down in a second." Her voice sounded light, carefree, a tone I hadn't heard in months. The man looked up, nodded, and took another drag of his cigarette. I felt something crack inside me. Not my heart, that would come later, but something more fundamental. The foundation of trust I'd built my life upon for the past 4 years. I watched as Emily emerged from the building. She wasn't dressed for a weekend in the country or a quiet retreat. She wore her black leather jacket, the one I'd given her last Christmas, and heels she hadn't worn in at least 6 months. Her hair was styled differently with a slight wave I didn't recognize. And her smile. God, her smile. Full and genuine, reaching her eyes in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in longer than I cared to admit. She approached the man with an easy familiarity, touched his arm, took the cigarette from between his fingers and drew a quick puff before handing it back. An intimate gesture between people who've crossed boundaries together. Before I could think better of it, I was out of my car and walking toward them, drawn by some magnetic pull of disbelief and betrayal and the desperate need to make this not be happening. Emily spotted me when I was about 20 feet away. Her smile froze, her eyes widened. "Josh," she said, my name falling from her lips like something broken. I froze at the sound of Emily's carefree voice, a tone I hadn't heard in months. It hit me like a physical blow, this sudden proof that her happiness existed, just not with me. She stepped out of the building not dressed for a quiet weekend in the woods, but in the black leather jacket I'd given her last Christmas. The one she'd said was too nice to wear regularly. Her legs were accentuated by heels she hadn't bothered to put on for our anniversary dinner 6 months ago. And that smile, wide, uninhibited, reaching all the way to her eyes. She embraced the stranger with an ease and familiarity that told me everything I needed to know. Her body language was relaxed, comfortable, no hesitation, no awkwardness. This wasn't new. I felt oddly detached as I stepped out from the shadows. Like I was watching myself in a movie, making all the wrong choices but unable to stop the inevitable scene from unfolding. Josh. My name hung in the air between us, her face frozen in an expression I'd never seen before, not shock or guilt but irritation. Like I'd interrupted something important. The man beside her didn't look alarmed. Instead, he smirked as if this whole situation was somehow amusing. "What are you doing here?" she asked, making no attempt to explain the scene I'd walked into, offering no immediate denial or excuse. I found my voice, though it sounded strange to my own ears. "I could ask you the same thing." Emily's posture shifted subtly as she glanced at her companion, then back at me. "This is a misunderstanding. It's work-related." The man beside her snorted. "Yeah, you could call it that." She shot him a warning look before stepping toward me, hands raised as if approaching a wounded animal. "Josh, let's just go upstairs and talk. You're making this worse than it is." For a moment, I considered it, following her into that building, listening to whatever story she'd concocted, maybe even believing it because the alternative was too painful to accept. But then I saw it in her eyes. She wasn't frightened or remorseful. She was calculating how much damage control would be required. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. Emily sighed, glancing around as if checking for witnesses to this scene. "This is Carter. He's a colleague." Carter nodded in my direction, still leaning against the brick wall of the building, watching our exchange with detached interest, like observing animals at a zoo. "A colleague?" I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. Emily stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I don't think we should do this here." She reached for my arm but I pulled back. "Do what exactly? Discuss why you lied about leaving town? Talk about why you're dressed like that to meet a colleague at 9 at night." Her expression hardened, a flash of something cold passing through her eyes. "You're being dramatic. You don't understand the situation." "Then explain it to me," I challenged, meeting her gaze directly. She glanced back at Carter. "Give us a minute?" He shrugged, dropped his cigarette and crushed it under his shoe. "Sure thing. I'll be upstairs." He walked back to the building, pausing at the entrance to look back at Emily with an expression that made my stomach turn, a mixture of desire and possession. When we were alone, Emily's demeanor changed. The mask slipped, just for a moment, revealing not guilt but annoyance. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she said softly, as if reading from a script. "Like what?" My voice was barely audible. "Like this?" She gestured vaguely around us. "In the street. With him here. Have you slept with him?" Emily's eyes narrowed. "I don't think we need to use that kind of language." Her evasion was answer enough. I felt a strange calm settle over me, clarity cutting through the fog of shock. This wasn't just about betrayal, it was about disrespect. About looking me in the eye and acting as if I was the one being unreasonable. "You told me you were going to your mother's," I said. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous habit I used to find endearing. "Plans changed. And Mom doesn't know I'm here." I didn't want to worry her. "You didn't want to get caught," I corrected. "You're being dramatic again," she said, her tone slipping from conciliatory to impatient. "You don't know the full situation." "Then tell me." She crossed her arms, glancing toward the building entrance. "You don't understand, things haven't been right between us for a long time. And that justifies lying? Sneaking around?" "I was going to tell you," she insisted. "I just needed time to figure things out." I laughed then, a hollow sound that surprised even me. Time to figure out what? How to leave without feeling guilty. How to keep me as a backup plan. Her eyes flashed. "That's not fair." "None of this is fair, Emily." She glanced at her watch, another telling gesture. Even now, standing in the wreckage of our relationship, she was counting the minutes until she could return to him. "Carter should go inside," she said abruptly. "This is between us." I watched as she signaled to him through the glass doors. He nodded, disappearing into the elevator. When she turned back to me, her expression had hardened into something I barely recognized. The Emily I thought I knew was gone, if she had ever existed at all. I stood there, unable to move or speak, watching as Carter disappeared inside the building. The night air had grown colder, or maybe it was just the chill spreading through my chest. Emily remained a few feet away, her arms crossed defensively, her expression a mixture of irritation and calculation. I didn't go upstairs. I didn't ask the questions she was preparing to deflect. Instead, I stood silent, letting the weight of this moment press down on both of us. Carter leaned against the brick wall of the building, watching our confrontation like it was street theater. His casual posture, shoulders relaxed, one foot propped against the wall, spoke volumes about how little our pain concerned him. Emily approached me again, her steps measured as if approaching a wounded animal that might lash out. Josh, please. Let's talk about this rationally. I stepped back, needing distance from her practiced concern. In that moment, I saw something flicker across her face, not hurt but frustration that her script wasn't working. I didn't want you to find out this way, she said softly, her voice gentle in a way that felt rehearsed. How did you want me to find out? My voice sounded distant even to myself. She looked down at her heels. The ones she'd complained were too uncomfortable to wear when I suggested dinner at that new restaurant last month. I was going to talk to you. When the time was right. When would that be, Emily? After how many lies? After how many nights like this? She flinched slightly, not from remorse but from the directness of my question. You're making this sound sordid. Did you sleep with him? I asked again, needing to hear it plainly. Emily's eyes darted toward Carter, then back to me. I don't think we need to use language like that. Her evasion felt like a slap. Not just the betrayal itself, but this refusal to acknowledge it directly, to hide behind euphemisms and deflections. You said you were going to your mother's house for the weekend? I said, my voice steadier than I expected. She sighed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Plans changed. And Mom doesn't know I'm here. She paused, adding, I didn't want to worry her. You mean you didn't want to get caught? I corrected. You're being dramatic, she said, her tone shifting from conciliatory to irritated. You don't know the full situation. I laughed then, a hollow sound that surprised even me. Then explain it to me, Emily. Help me understand why you're dressed up for him when you've worn nothing but sweatpants at home for months. Explain why you've been lying about where you're going and who you're with. Her face hardened, that mask of concern slipping to reveal the calculation beneath. I didn't plan for this to happen. You planned everything else, I said. The overnight bag. The story about needing space. The whole performance of kissing me goodbye while already thinking about him. Emily looked away, her jaw tight. You always do this. Turn everything into some dramatic scene, make everything so black and white. Is he the only one? I asked, the question burning in my throat. Her hesitation told me everything. I need to send Carter inside, she said abruptly. This is between us. I watched as she motioned to him through the glass doors of the building. He nodded, disappearing into the elevator. When she turned back to me, her expression had hardened into something I barely recognized. We've been having problems for months, she said, as if this justified everything. Problems you never mentioned, I countered. Problems you never gave us a chance to fix. Emily shook her head, her voice taking on an edge I'd rarely heard. I tried, Josh. You just didn't listen. When? When did you try? Between your late nights at work, and your weekends away with friends I've never met. This is exactly what I'm talking about, she snapped. You turn everything into an accusation or a lecture. Or worse, you pretend everything is fine when it obviously isn't. I felt the conversation shifting, watching as she tried to reframe her betrayal as my failure. Don't do that, I said quietly. Don't make this about me not hearing you when you never spoke. The night around us seemed too quiet, the streetlights casting harsh shadows across her face. A face I thought I knew better than my own. I came out here to sort things with you, she said, her voice suddenly sharp. Sort what things? Your story? Your excuses? See? This is what you do. You don't actually want to understand. You just want to make me the villain. I studied her face, searching for any sign of the woman I'd loved, the person I thought would never hurt me this way. Did you ever love me at all? Something flickered in her eyes, not pain but impatience. Of course I did. That's not what this is about. Then what is it about, Emily? Help me understand why you've been lying to my face for. How long has this been going on? She looked away. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Emily turned back, her expression suddenly cold. I don't love you anymore, Josh. I haven't for some time. I've been trying to hold on for your sake. The words struck like physical blows, each one landing precisely where it would hurt most. Not just the confession of lost love, but the implication that she'd stayed out of pity, that my feelings were a burden she'd been nobly bearing. Before I could respond, she walked past me, her shoulder brushing mine as she headed toward the building entrance. She didn't look back, didn't hesitate, just walked away as if closing a door on a room she no longer wished to enter. I stood alone on the sidewalk, watching as she disappeared inside, leaving me with nothing but questions that no longer seemed to matter. I don't remember how long I stood there on the sidewalk, watching the spot where Emily had disappeared into the building. Time seemed to stretch and compress, the world around me continuing while I remained frozen in place. A couple walked past, laughing about something I couldn't hear. A taxi honked at a crossing pedestrian. Life went on impossibly. The door to the building opened again and Emily emerged. Alone this time. Her expression had changed. The mask of irritation replaced by something more calculated, more composed. She put herself back together in the few minutes she'd been inside. "We should talk properly," she said, her voice steady. "Not here on the street." I found myself nodding, still numb, as she led us to a small park across the street. An urban pocket of greenery with metal benches and decorative lighting. At this hour it was empty except for us. We sat on opposite ends of a bench, the distance between us more than physical. "I met Carter at a conference 3 months ago," she began, her voice clinical, as if reciting facts for a deposition. "Financial Technology Summit in Chicago." I said nothing, watching a moth circle one of the park lamps, drawn endlessly to what would destroy it. "He's not important," she continued. "He's just something I needed." The casual dismissal of him stung almost as much as the betrayal itself. If he meant so little, what did that make her actions? What did that make our relationship? "You needed to lie to me?" I finally asked. "You needed to sneak around behind my back?" Emily sighed, the sound sharp with impatience. "I needed something different. You're so predictable, Josh. Always the same. Always safe." The word safe cut deep, transformed from a virtue into an accusation. "And that justifies months of deception?" I asked. "The elaborate stories about work events, the fake trips to your mother's, all the texts I now realize weren't being sent from where you claim to be?" "I lied because you don't listen," she snapped, her composed facade cracking. "Every time I tried to talk about us, you'd either turn it into a lecture about communication or pretend everything was fine." I stared at her, truly seeing her for perhaps the first time. "When did you try, Emily? When were these conversations I supposedly shut down?" "All the time." She threw her hands up. "All those times I said I was restless, that I felt stuck. You'd just say, 'We'll plan a trip,' or, 'Maybe you need a new hobby,' like I was talking about being bored with a book, not our entire life together." The night air felt suddenly cold, reality settling over me like frost. "So instead of being clearer, instead of maybe suggesting couples therapy or having an actual conversation about your feelings, you decided to sleep with a stranger from a conference?" Emily's eyes darkened. "He wasn't the first." The words hung between us, heavy and irrevocable. "How many?" I heard myself ask, my voice distant to my own ears. "Does it matter?" she countered. 1 for 10, would the number change anything? It would, but I couldn't articulate why. Each betrayal was a separate wound, each lie another foundation stone pulled from what I thought we had built together. "I came here tonight to figure out how to end things with you," she said, her voice turning sharp. "I just hadn't worked out how to tell you yet." The calculated coldness of her admission left me speechless. While I'd been worrying about her unusual behavior, attributing it to work stress or depression, she'd been methodically planning her exit. "You're always so fragile," she continued, the words striking like a knife between my ribs. "I never knew how to tell you difficult things without you either shutting down or overanalyzing until we're both exhausted." "Fragile," I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. Of all the things she'd said tonight, somehow this hurt most. This reframing of my sensitivity, my emotional openness, as a weakness she'd had to manage. "I don't love you anymore, Josh," she said plainly. "I haven't for some time. I've been trying to hold on for your sake." I laughed then, a hollow sound devoid of humor. "For my sake? You've been lying, cheating, and manipulating me, for my sake." "I didn't want to hurt you," she insisted, but there was no real conviction behind the words. "You didn't want to deal with the fallout," I corrected. "You didn't want the inconvenience of my pain. There's a difference." Emily stood abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself. Not from cold, I realized, but from impatience, physically containing her growing irritation with this conversation, with my refusal to follow whatever script she'd prepared. "This is exactly why I couldn't just tell you," she said, her voice rising. "You make everything so difficult, so dramatic." I remained seated, looking up at her. Is honesty really such an unreasonable expectation? "I'm being honest now," she countered. "Only because you were caught," I said quietly. She looked away, her profile sharp against the night sky. "It doesn't matter how we got here. This is where we are. It's over, Josh." With those words, she turned and walked back toward the building where Carter waited. Her heels clicked against the pavement, a steady rhythm that faded with distance. She didn't look back, didn't hesitate, just walked away as if closing a door on a room she no longer wished to enter. I sat alone in the dark park, surrounded by the gentle sounds of the city night, feeling as if I'd been talking to a stranger wearing the face of someone I once loved. I didn't go home. I couldn't face our apartment, our bed, our photos, the life we'd built on what I now knew was shifting sand. So I drove. No destination in mind, just the mechanical motions of hands on the wheel, foot on the pedal. The city lights blurred as I moved through streets that grew less familiar with each turn. My phone buzzed several times. I ignored it. Whatever Emily had to say now couldn't undo what had already been done. Whatever justifications or explanations she might offer wouldn't change the reality of her calculated betrayal. I drove until the gas light came on, a soft yellow warning in the darkness of my car. Even then, I kept going for another 20 minutes, as if outrunning the inevitable moment when I'd have to stop and face what had happened. Eventually, I pulled into the parking lot of an abandoned shopping center. The storefronts were dark, their windows covered with brown paper. The lampposts cast pools of sickly yellow light across the cracked asphalt. It was nearly 3 in the morning and the world felt deserted. I killed the engine but remained in the driver's seat, hands still gripping the wheel. The silence pressed in around me, broken only by the occasional distant sound of a passing car on the main road. My mind replayed Emily's words in an endless loop, each repetition revealing new layers of cruelty I'd missed in the moment. He's just something I needed. You're so predictable, Josh. Always safe. I've been trying to hold on for your sake. You're always so fragile. The word fragile echoed in my head, transformed from the sensitivity I'd thought was a strength into a weakness she'd had to manage. Had she been laughing at me all this time? Treating me like a child to be handled rather than a partner to be respected? I checked my phone finally. 3 missed calls from Emily, 1 text. Where are you? We should talk more. No apology. No acknowledgement of the pain she'd caused. Just the implicit expectation that I would come when called, that we would continue on her terms. I set the phone down without responding. Hours passed as I sat there, watching the sky lighten almost imperceptibly in the east. My thoughts circled from shock to anger to a hollow emptiness I couldn't name. Not quite grief, that would come later, but the disorienting sensation of finding yourself suddenly in a world where the rules you thought you understood no longer apply. Around 7 in the morning, I started the car again and drove home. The streets were beginning to fill with early commuters, people heading to jobs and lives that continued uninterrupted while mine had been upended. When I unlocked our apartment door, Max was waiting, tail wagging tentatively as if sensing something was wrong. He pressed his warm body against my legs, looking up with those soulful eyes that seemed to understand more than any words could express. I knelt down and wrapped my arms around him, burying my face in his soft fur. Something in my chest cracked, then a dam breaking. I held on to him as silent tears came, the first I'd allowed myself since standing on that sidewalk watching Emily walk away. After I'd pulled myself together, I washed my face and made coffee I didn't want. The apartment felt both familiar and alien, everything in its place but somehow wrong, like a stage set rather than a home. Without allowing myself to think too much about what I was doing, I opened Emily's laptop. She never left it unattended, always closing it when she left the room, always taking it with her on trips. But in her rush to meet Carter, she'd left it on her desk, the battery slowly dying. I told myself I was just looking for confirmation, for closure. What I found was something else entirely, not just evidence but an arsenal. In a folder labeled Personal, I discovered hundreds of emails between Emily and at least 4 different men over the past year. There were hotel confirmations, dinner reservations, flight itineraries for weekends I thought she'd been at conferences or visiting friends. Another folder contained screenshots of conversations with someone named Matthew about a weekend in Las Vegas 3 months ago, a trip she told me was a women's retreat for work. I remembered sending flowers to her hotel room, remembered her telling me the front desk had lost them. The truth sat before me in black and white. She'd been in a different hotel entirely with a different person. But the most devastating discovery came in a document simply titled Conversation. It was a script. Emily had prepared talking points for the day I inevitably discovered her infidelity. Bullet points of explanations and deflections. Ways to frame my reactions as unreasonable. Notes on how to maintain control of the narrative. One line stood out among the rest. Josh will likely become emotional. Stay calm. Don't cry. Keep control of the narrative. I closed the laptop slowly, feeling as if I'd been punched in the stomach. This hadn't been a momentary lapse or a relationship that had simply faded. This had been methodical, calculated, not just betrayal but a deliberate campaign of deception. I sat there in the quiet morning light, Max resting his head on my knee, as the full weight of what I'd lost, or perhaps had never really had, settled over me. I locked myself in the bathroom, gripping the edge of the sink as I stared at my reflection. A stranger looked back at me, pale, hollow-eyed, unrecognizable. I splashed cold water on my face, but it did nothing to clear the fog of betrayal that seemed to surround me. My breath came in short, painful gasps. The walls of the small bathroom closed in around me. I sank to the floor, back against the cool tile, knees drawn to my chest like a child hiding from monsters. But the monster wasn't under the bed or in the closet. The monster had been sleeping beside me, sharing meals with me, looking into my eyes and telling me she loved me while methodically documenting her betrayals. How had I missed it? How had I failed to see the person she truly was beneath the carefully constructed facade? I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app. I needed to hear it said aloud, needed to make it real instead of this nightmare that didn't quite seem possible. "Emily," I began, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. "You called me fragile. You called me safe and predictable, like those were flaws instead of the foundations I thought we were building on." The words tumbled out, gaining momentum. "You didn't fall out of love. You weren't confused. You didn't make a mistake. You executed a plan. You created spreadsheets of your deceptions. You wrote scripts for how to handle me when I inevitably discovered your betrayal." I paused, taking a shuddering breath. "You didn't just lie to me about where you were going or who you were with. You lied about who you are. And the worst part is, I still don't know if anything was ever real." I stopped the recording and sat in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on me. After a few minutes, I stood up, washed my face again, and walked back into the living room with a strange, calm clarity. I picked up my phone again, but instead of calling Emily, I took a screenshot of her conversation document, her script for manipulating me, and sent it to her without comment. For minutes later, my phone rang. Emily's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call. A text followed almost immediately. "Where did you find that?" Not an apology. Not an explanation. Just anger at being caught. 2 more calls, both declined. Then another text. "If you're going through my personal files without permission, that's a violation of trust." I laughed out loud at that, a harsh, bitter sound that startled Max, who had been watching me with concerned eyes. The sheer audacity of her accusation, the complete lack of self-awareness it represented, was almost impressive in its absurdity. "We need to talk," came her next message. "You're clearly upset and not thinking clearly." It was as if she was following her script even now, trying to position me as the irrational one, the one whose emotions couldn't be trusted. I set the phone down without responding and walked to the kitchen to make a cup of coffee I knew I wouldn't drink. My hands moved automatically, measuring grounds, filling the water reservoir, pressing the brew button. The familiar routine anchored me as I tried to make sense of what my life had become in the span of 12 hours. I spent the rest of the day methodically documenting everything I'd found. I created a timeline, dates, names, messages, call logs, piecing together the elaborate network of lies Emily had constructed around me. It wasn't about gathering ammunition, it was about confirming to myself that I wasn't crazy, that what I'd discovered was real. I gave myself rules: 3 days to process, 3 days of silence. I wouldn't block her number. I wanted her to feel the weight of my deliberate ignoring, wanted her to experience the powerlessness of being unheard. Max stayed close, sensing my distress, his warm presence a constant reminder that I wasn't entirely alone. I forced myself to take him for walks, to go through the motions of normalcy even as everything inside me felt shattered. Emily continued to text throughout the day, her messages evolving from defensive to conciliatory as hours passed without response. "I understand you're angry. We should discuss this like adults. I never meant to hurt you. Please answer your phone. I'm worried about you." Each message felt like a line from her script, calculated to elicit a specific response rather than expressing genuine remorse. By evening, I'd reached a strange state of emotional exhaustion, a numbness that wasn't quite peace but at least provided some respite from the acute pain of the morning. I fed Max, watched him eat with his usual enthusiasm, and felt a surge of gratitude for his uncomplicated love. I went to bed early but didn't sleep, staring at the ceiling as moonlight created shifting patterns across it. Emily's side of the bed remained untouched, a physical representation of the void she'd left behind. Sunday evening arrived with a key turning in the lock. I sat at the kitchen table, Emily's laptop open in front of me, folders of evidence spread out around it. I remained still, watching the door swing open. Emily stepped inside, freezing when she saw me waiting. Her eyes darted to the screen, to the papers, to my face. For once, her carefully composed expression slipped, revealing something that might have been fear. Josh, she said, her voice barely audible. This isn't what it looks like. This isn't what it looks like. 5 words that confirmed everything. If she'd had any explanation, any context that could have transformed what I was seeing into something forgivable, she would have offered it immediately. Instead, she reached for the universal language of people caught red-handed. Emily stood in the doorway, her eyes fixed on the open laptop, on the folders and papers spread across the kitchen table. I watched her catalog each item. Screenshots of conversations, hotel receipts, the printed conversation script with its bullet points of manipulation. Her face went through a series of micro-expressions: shock, fear, calculation, and finally, a practiced composure. You went through my personal files, she said, shutting the door behind her. Not an accusation but an attempt to shift the narrative. Don't use that word, I said quietly. What word? Narrative. That's your thing. That's your defense. Emily set her bag down carefully, as if any sudden movement might shatter the fragile moment. You're overreacting. If you'd just let me explain. I don't want your explanation, I interrupted. I don't want a scene or a confession. I want you to hear yourself. I want you to acknowledge what this actually is. She moved toward the table but I stood up, blocking her access. I didn't want her closing the laptop or gathering the papers. I didn't want her managing the evidence of her betrayal. What do you want me to say, Josh? Her voice had that practiced patient tone she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. That I made mistakes? That I wasn't happy? I've been trying to tell you that. This wasn't unhappiness, I said, gesturing to the materials spread across the table. This wasn't a slow drift or a miscommunication. This was methodical. Calculated. I picked up one of the hotel confirmations. You used our home as a base camp while you played tourist in other people's lives. Emily laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that contained no humor. You're acting like you didn't notice, like you were perfectly happy with our little routine. I said, my voice steady despite the anger rising in my chest. I asked if you were happy. I asked what was wrong. I asked if we should see someone, talk to someone. You didn't answer. You deflected. I picked up her script. You were planning this. Not just the affairs but how you'd handle me when I found out. You had bullet points, Emily. Contingency plans for my emotional responses. She crossed her arms, her defensive posture at odds with the reasonable tone she was trying to maintain. You're making this into something it's not. What is it then? I asked. Help me understand how this isn't exactly what it looks like, a systematic campaign of lies. Emily sighed, looking around the apartment as if seeing it for the first time. People fall out of love, Josh. It happens every day. I didn't know how to tell you. You knew how to tell Matthew about the hotel room you booked in Vegas. You knew how to tell Carter when to expect you. You knew how to coordinate alibis with friends I've never met. My voice remained calm, detached almost as if discussing someone else's life. What you didn't know was how to be honest with the person you supposedly loved. She flinched at that, the first genuine reaction I'd seen from her. It's not that simple. It is that simple, I countered. Love includes respect. Respect includes honesty. You didn't respect me enough to end things before starting something new. You didn't respect me enough to tell me the truth. Emily stepped closer, switching tactics. I cared about you too much to hurt you. I knew how you'd react. You didn't care how I'd feel discovering the truth. You only cared about controlling how and when I found out. I paused, meeting her eyes directly. I was never a partner to you. I was an obligation. A problem to be managed. Something shifted in her expression then, frustration breaking through the careful mask. You're turning this into some sad story where you're the victim and I'm the villain. Relationships are more complicated than that. They are, I agreed. But betrayal is pretty straightforward. She ran a hand through her hair, frustration mounting. What do you want from me, Josh? To grovel? To beg forgiveness? Will that make you feel better? I want a divorce. The words hung in the air between us, simple and irreversible. Emily stared at me, clearly not believing I was serious. You're being impulsive, she said, her tone shifting to one I recognized from her script. Calm, reasonable, positioning me as the emotional one. We should take some time to think about this. I've had 3 days to think about it. I've had a year of lies to consider. My decision is made. Emily's composure cracked slightly. What will you tell people? The truth. She laughed again, that same bitter sound. And what is that, exactly? That you had multiple affairs. That you lied systematically. That you created spreadsheets to track your deceptions and wrote scripts to manage my reactions when I discovered them. Emily's face hardened. No one will believe that. They'll think you're exaggerating because you're hurt. Maybe, I conceded. But I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing it for me. She looked around the apartment again, her eyes lingering on our photos, our shared possessions. For a moment, I thought I saw regret flash across her face, but it was quickly replaced by resignation. I hope you enjoy being alone, she said finally, the words meant to wound. I met her gaze steadily. I'd rather be alone than deceived by someone standing 6 feet away. She had no response to that. We stood in silence, the physical proximity between us meaningless against the vast emotional distance that now existed. In that moment, looking at the stranger who wore my wife's face, I realized the most painful truth of all. I had never really known her. I didn't spend another night in our apartment. After Emily left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the pictures on the wall, I packed a bag with essentials, grabbed Max's food and leash and walked out. The place that had been home for 2 years now felt contaminated, every corner holding memories I couldn't trust. My brother Ethan lived 20 minutes away in a converted warehouse loft. I called from the car. Can Max and I crash with you for a bit? To his credit, Ethan didn't ask questions when I showed up at his door at 11:30 at night, a duffel bag in one hand and Max's leash in the other. He just nodded, took the bag and showed me to his spare room. Beer? He offered. No thanks. Maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow works. He scratched Max behind the ears. You need anything else? I'm good. Thanks for this. Anytime. He hesitated at the door. You know where to find me if you want to talk. I nodded, grateful for his understanding. Ethan and I had always had an unspoken agreement to give each other space when needed. He'd crashed on my couch after his own brutal breakup 3 years ago, and I'd done the same when he offered. No explanations required, no timeline enforced. I slept surprisingly well that night, as if my body had been carrying a weight it could finally set down. Max curled up at the foot of the bed, his warmth and steady breathing a reminder that not everything in my life had been a lie. The next morning, I met with a divorce attorney before Emily had even texted to ask where I was. The lawyer was a no-nonsense woman named Valerie who listened to my story without judgment, taking notes in a leather-bound notebook. Do you have copies of everything you found? She asked. Yes. And the originals are still on her laptop. Good. Don't touch those. Electronic evidence can be tricky if you're the one who accessed it without permission. She tapped her pen against the notebook. But what you've already documented will be helpful. By noon, divorce papers were being prepared. By 2, Emily had sent 3 messages asking for an adult conversation. I sent back only one response, a PDF of the divorce filing. 2 hours later, she showed up at Ethan's loft. My brother answered the door, his expression neutral. Josh needs to talk to me, I heard her say. It's important. Ethan glanced back at me, raising an eyebrow in question. I nodded and stood up from the kitchen island where I'd been working on my laptop. Emily stepped inside, her eyes taking in the industrial space with its exposed brick and pipes. She looked tired but not devastated, irritated rather than broken. We need to discuss this rationally, she said, holding up her phone with the divorce PDF displayed. This isn't a solution. It's not meant to be a solution, I replied, keeping my distance. It's a conclusion. She sighed, adopting the patient tone that now felt like sandpaper against my nerves. I understand I hurt you. I realize now that I was sabotaging what we had because I was scared of how much I needed you. The practiced quality of her words struck me, another script, another performance. I didn't stop loving you, she continued. I just got lost. I made terrible choices trying to find something I already had. I studied her face, searching for sincerity, for any hint of the woman I thought I'd married. You didn't just break this, Emily. You dismantled it piece by piece while convincing me I was imagining the missing parts. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. People are already asking questions. Rachel isn't speaking to me. My mom keeps calling, wanting to know what happened. Pause. Carter won't return my texts. And there it was, the real reason for this visit. Not remorse, not love, but the consequences she hadn't anticipated. The audience reaction she hadn't scripted. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, meaning it despite everything. But I'm not responsible for managing how others respond to your choices. I'm trying to apologize, she said, frustration edging into her voice. I know. And I accept your apology. I moved toward the door, opening it gently. But acceptance isn't the same as reconciliation. Emily stared at me, clearly not having expected this response. She'd come prepared for anger, for tears, for a chance to work her way back into control. My calm finality left her without a script to follow. "This isn't over," she said, but the words lacked conviction. "It is for me." I kept my hand on the door, firm but not forceful. "Goodbye, Emily." After she left, Ethan emerged from his bedroom where he'd tactfully retreated during our conversation. "You okay?" he asked. "I will be," I said, surprised to find I meant it. The next morning, I woke with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in over a year. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to choose. The weight of trying to fix something that the other person was actively breaking had lifted from my shoulders. My phone rang while I was making coffee. Karen, Emily's mother. "Josh," she said when I answered, her voice gentle but direct. "Emily told me what's happening. She says she's falling apart." I waited, expecting a plea to reconsider, to give her daughter another chance. Instead, Karen sighed. "She's not used to consequences." The simple truth of that statement caught me off guard. "No, she's not. I raised her to be strong, independent," Karen continued. "Somewhere along the way that turned into something else, something harder." We talked for a few minutes more about nothing and everything. Before hanging up, she paused. "I hope you do more than just survive this," she said quietly. "Emily took enough already." After the call ended, I stood by the window in Ethan's loft, watching the city awaken below. For the first time since that night on the sidewalk, I allowed myself to think beyond survival, beyond the immediate pain of betrayal. I began slowly, cautiously rebuilding. I found an apartment downtown, a small one-bedroom with large windows and a rooftop where Max could get some fresh air. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected. I picked up my camera again, something I'd loved before Emily but had somehow set aside during our relationship. 3 weeks into this new life, I was at the farmer's market downtown when I spotted her. Emily, standing by the organic produce, talking with a woman I didn't recognize. Both wore workout clothes and carried coffee cups. Before I could turn and walk in the other direction, she saw me. Emily spotted me across the farmer's market, her eyes widening in recognition. For a heartbeat, I considered turning away, pretending I hadn't seen her. But something stopped me, perhaps the realization that running would give her a power I no longer wanted her to have. She said something to the woman beside her, who nodded and moved toward a nearby stall, then made her way through the crowd toward me. I noticed she'd had her hair cut shorter, and there was something different about her posture. Less assured, perhaps, or simply more genuine without an audience to perform for. "Josh," she said, stopping a few feet away. "How are you?" The simple question hung between us, weighted with all that had happened. "I'm doing okay," I answered, surprised to find I meant it. "Not perfect, not healed, but okay," and that felt like an achievement. Emily nodded, fidgeting with her coffee cup. "You look good." I didn't return the compliment. Instead, I asked, "How have you been?" "Coping," she said, glancing around as if searching for the right words. "It's been an adjustment." She waited, clearly expecting me to ask for details, to show interest in her life. When I didn't, she filled the silence herself. "Do you remember that little bakery on Maple Street? The one with the ridiculous chocolate croissants?" She smiled as if we were old friends reminiscing. "I was there yesterday and I almost texted you. Habit, I guess." I nodded, recognizing the technique. Emily was good at this, creating false intimacy through shared memories, making the conversation seem deeper than it was. Once, I would have eagerly followed this breadcrumb trail back into her world. "Rachel told me you got a place downtown," she continued when I didn't respond. "In that new building near the park." The mention of Rachel caught me off guard. "You're talking to Rachel again?" Emily shifted her weight. "Not really. She mentioned it when I was apologizing to her." Pause. "I've been doing a lot of that lately." Apologizing. She looked at me directly for the first time. "I started seeing a therapist. She's helping me understand some things about myself. About how I used people." The admission seemed genuine, lacking the calculated quality I'd come to recognize in her apologies. Still, I kept my response measured. "I'm glad you're getting help." Emily took a step closer. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said that night. About dismantling something while convincing you that you were imagining the missing pieces." She swallowed hard. "You were right. I was gaslighting you. I didn't want to see myself as the kind of person who would do that, but I was." I felt a strange mixture of validation and emptiness at her words. The acknowledgement I'd once desperately wanted now felt hollow, arriving too late to repair what had been broken. "Thank you for saying that," I said simply. She looked surprised, perhaps expecting either a rejection of her apology or immediate forgiveness. I offered neither. "The divorce papers are almost finalized," I told her, changing the subject. My lawyer says it should be official by next month. Emily nodded, her eyes dropping to her coffee cup. I really thought you'd be the one to come back, she said quietly. I was so sure you'd change your mind. The statement revealed more about her than perhaps she intended. The assumption that her actions wouldn't have permanent consequences, that her scripts would eventually work their magic. I did come back, I replied. To myself. Something shifted in her expression then, not anger or hurt, but a reluctant understanding. For perhaps the first time she was seeing me clearly, not as an extension of her needs or a character in her narrative, but as an autonomous person making choices she couldn't control. I should go, she said, gesturing toward her friend who was waiting by the fruit stand. It was good to see you, Josh. Take care, Emily, I said and meant it. I watched her walk away, waiting for the familiar ache in my chest. It was there but duller now, a shadow of what it had been. Not because I still loved her, but because I was finally mourning the person I'd thought she was, the relationship I'd believed we had. That was 4 months ago. The divorce finalized with little drama. Emily made no further attempts to reconnect, and I heard through mutual friends that she'd taken a job in another city. Our shared history gradually transformed from an open wound to a scar, still visible but no longer painful to touch. I rebuilt my life piece by piece. Not a replica of what was lost, but something new, something that belonged entirely to me. I took a photography class every Tuesday evening, learning to capture the world as I saw it rather than as others told me it should be. The first photo I framed and hung in my new apartment wasn't a dramatic landscape or an artistic still life, but an image of an elderly man feeding pigeons in the park, his face lined with a lifetime of joys and sorrows. Ethan visits often, bringing takeout and bad movies. We don't talk about Emily anymore, not because we're avoiding the subject, but because she's simply no longer relevant to the story I'm living now. Max has adjusted well to our new home, claiming the sunny spot by the living room window as his own. Sometimes when I watch him sleeping there, peaceful and trusting, I think about how differently things might have gone if I hadn't discovered the truth that night. She broke me and I let her. But I'm the one who put myself back together. There's a saying that when someone shows you who they are, not in words, not in apologies, not in pain, but in patterns, believe them. It took me too long to learn that lesson, but I won't forget it. The person who shattered my world also set me free from a life built on illusions. That's not forgiveness exactly, but it's something like gratitude, a recognition that even the darkest moments can lead us back to ourselves, if only we're brave enough to walk through them.